Good evening. I hope we're live. I'm sure I'll be told if we're not. Welcome everybody to this, our third town hall here, talking about the amazing park in the sky that is going to be the Camden Highline. Some of you, I suspect, will know a bit about it, may even have been to one of these before. Many of you will be here for the first time. Hopefully we'll be able to cater to both ends of that spectrum and give you some both new information and existing. With me, you'll see on the screen here are my esteemed colleagues, James Corner from Field Operations, who is bringing the whole thing to life. He's designing it and taking it through planning. And part of that team is the amazing Tatiana here, who is the architect designing particularly the entrances, and she'll be talking a bit about that later on. But before we get to them, I'm just going to remind us all of how we got here and what we're doing. So I'm going to show you a few quick slides. This won't take long. So we're building an amazing park in the sky, and it's going to have a live train running alongside it. For those of you who don't know, myself and my colleagues here in Camden have been running these business improvement districts for ages. Camden Town Unlimited has been around for 15 years and is funded by a levy on occupying businesses above a certain size. And we do lots of things, including something called Camden Collective, which some of you may have come across. We take over meanwhile space, disused buildings, give most of the space away to young creative startups who are not typically WeWork, if that phrase means anything to you, and then look after those buildings well and give them back in good order if required to. And these are some of the examples of that. This one here, by the way, is the current one we've got in the old auction rooms behind Camden Town Tube Station on Buck Street. That is the New York Highline from above, for those of you who may have been there or know of it. That's the Paris version. The Promenade Plantée, which predates the American one. Yes, the French got there first. And that is what we're talking about. This is actually looking west. There's Camden Town Tube Station. There's St Pancras, but much easier to look on this map here. And you can see King's Cross here, Coal Drops Yard, and then the four entrances that we're currently proposing here. One on York Way, one on Camley Street. And then the bit that we're particularly going to focus on tonight and for the main planning application, or the initial planning application, Camden Road here and Kentish Town Road at Camden Gardens. So without further ado, why don't I stop there, Jim, and then you can share your screen and pick us up from here. So that's okay.
Okay. So do we have the full image?
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah. Okay, well, welcome everybody who is tuning in. This is our third public town hall over the past year. The first one, we sort of introduced the site and the issues and solicited ideas and feedback. The second one, we presented the conceptual ideas for the master plan and for the design vocabulary and described some of the places that we wanted to create. And this third one is really going to focus now on the first section, the section that we hope to begin construction on as soon as next year. With me is Tatiana van Prusen with VPPR Architects, who have been our very good and able collaborator and design partner here. So both Tatiana and I will share the presentation. I wanted to start actually with this image. It's drawn by school children in Camden as part of our outreach effort over the past few months. Led by our very able partners at Street Space. And they did this paint by numbers class and asked children to imagine various settings on the Camden Highline. And they've drawn some really magical and inspired images here that I hope we can match with the real thing. The outreach has been extensive over the past few months. More recently, there was this painting class with a group of school children. There's been a children's book that was created, again, a big effort from Street Space to make this happen. Significant outreach, even knocking on people's doors and dropping off postcards and asking for input and for ideas, and response to some of the images and the schemes that we have. There was even a lighting demonstration for various neighbors to show how lighting could actually work in a way that is not invasive. It provides adequate security and safety, but it is not overly intense. So there's been a lot of engagement. Even prior to when we began, Simon and his team were out in the community, and we have continued that over the past year. We've heard all sorts of things. There's lots of optimism and aspirations for this project, lots of seating, places to stroll, places to watch trains, and there's a number of concerns for vandalism, for safety, for operational aspects. We believe that we've addressed these concerns in the scheme. Just quickly, a map shows here the extent that we're looking at, 1.2 kilometers, 3/4 of a mile, running east-west through Camden. And the importance of that is that it really is a key link in this green ring, green loop idea that would connect west through Regent's Park down to Euston Station and all the way through the King's Cross development back up to Camden. So it's an important link in realizing this larger green loop for London. As Simon introduced, this is the Highline snaking through Camden today. In the foreground, you see the canal and Camden Gardens, Camden Road, and in the middle background is the new King's Cross development. This is a view looking west towards Camden Gardens. In the middle is Royal College Street. You can see the active train line on one side of the High Line and this sort of abandoned landscape that we're going to appropriate now as a new public park on the right-hand side. This view is looking east. You can see the way some of the bridges on the High Line that cross streets have this open beam structure, which is quite interesting. It allows light down to the streets below. And for people walking over the beams, it's quite an unusual experience. One more view looking west with St. Pancras Way Bridge and the Randolph Street Bridge, and down on the ground. This is at Camden Gardens. You can see the masonry structure, the arches of the viaduct. It's a very impressive structure. There's a number of passageways that go underneath. And where we do have street crossings, the bridges take on this metal form. They're very iconic. They're all a little different. They're gateways to and from Camden. Here's Simon taking a group for a tour around the streets, looking up here. And then on the High Line itself, there's just extraordinary textures, materials, experiences. The experience of the train going by is really quite dramatic. The way you cross over bridges, the collusion of natural elements with industrial transportation components. This is a view on the top side that shows a portion of the landscape today. A narrower segment here with the chimney pots and rooftops that are there as you look out. So a variety of textures, a variety of qualities that we hope to leverage. As we discussed in a previous town hall, just going to mention it very quickly here, but this is an enormously constrained site to make it safe for public use. There's an active train line. There's a lot of rules and regulations we need to abide by. There are soil issues. There are a number of dimensional constraints where sometimes the dimensions get a little tight. So we've had to work really hard to produce something that is publicly accessible, that is safe, and is at the same time exciting and unique and special to the High Line itself. These plans quickly just again introduce you and orient you to where we are. On the left is Camden Gardens, where the Highline will begin, moving east towards King's Cross. We see it as basically in 3 phases of construction, and each of those phases has a distinct context. The first one, Camden Gardens to Camden Road, has the historical heritage context of Camden. The phase 2 from Camden Road to Camley Street has more of a residential character centered around the Agar Grove estate. And phase 3, much more about Maiden Lane Estate, York Way, and tying into King's Cross. As Simon mentioned, there will be 4 key access points from street level. One at Camden Gardens, one at Camden Road, one at Camley Street, one at York Way, and an optional 5th that we're still studying at St. Pancras Way. And each of those access points is tied to some of the key streets. We hope to be able to green those streets over time and to add bicycle lanes and to make sure that this is all part of a larger interconnected network with the town. The master plan diagram then elaborates a little bit more. We show here the proposed Camley Street development that is to come, various other projects that are in the works. And we inventory here a variety of segments to the design of the Highline that reflect its character, as well as its staging over time. But the overall aim is to produce a green garden in the sky, lush with vegetation, significant habitat structures with diversity of wildlife, and just to create extraordinary experiences for people as they come up and discover this space and walk along and have a series of episodic experiences. To begin with phase 1, this is a axonometric, a sort of an aerial view. In the bottom left, you're looking at Royal College Street and the bridge that goes over Camden Road and Royal College Street there. And in the top right, you're looking at the triangle of Camden Gardens. And this is important because this is an important link along Water Lane, along the face of the viaduct to Camden Market and to the locks. So what we're really trying to do is to create a very strong entrance at Camden Gardens that really ties into Water Lane and to the lock and to all of the energy and all of the people down at the market to draw them east to Camden Gardens and up onto the structure itself. And then you can see here that section 1 has an elaborate walk through a sequence of plantings and gardens and places for people to sit and experience. And we come then to Royal College Street. And this, what you're looking at here, is a sketch of the first segment, the first phase. At Camden Gardens, this is an aerial photograph. You see the triangle there between Kentish Town Road and Camden Street, and the importance of Water Lane connecting east-west. And I will pass the baton to Tatiana in a moment to talk about the entryway. But I just want to say before we do that, that we're also looking at improvements, making improvements to Camden Gardens, making them more, adding vegetation, adding furniture, improving signage and wayfinding and lighting. And even an idea to create a raised street, a shared street with pedestrians, bicycles, and cars, so that this is a much more pedestrian-oriented, much more walkable beginning or starting point for the journey onto the Highline itself. You can see in this plan the 3 arches underneath the viaduct, and those are what we are working with to create this new access point at this location. So Tatiana, please continue describing this moment.
Thanks, James. I think the next slide should have some some of the existing site photos of Camden Gardens. And I think a point I wanted to make was that each access way along the Highline is located in a very distinct space. They each have their own special characters. And I think we've tended to treat them as found spaces. Some of them are semi-derelict. And our approach has been to try to amplify that by treating them as a sort of urban follies, with lifts and stairs providing unusual views of the structures they pass through in the city around them. So this is Camden Gardens, a sort of oasis from busy Camden, with this viaduct running through it with the 3 empty arches. And I think on the next slide, we've got a plan shows that we're proposing a distinct and different use for each arch. So the western arch, where we have a wide stair with a kiosk below the landing of that stair, and that occupies the first arch. So that would be how you enter to go up to the Highline. The central arch would remain completely open, but we're proposing a long communal table inside for people to sort of come together for coffee, picnics, and to eat food from those kiosks. And then the smallest arch on the east would be fully glazed and hold a cafe on the south side and a sort of service space on the north side. So the next slide shows how that works in 3 dimensions. So you can see the stair coming up from the south. And importantly, that stair aligns with an access from Water Lane, which brings you down to the canal. So that's quite an important link for us, which is why we start the stair on the south side. But people will be arriving from both the south and the north, so we felt it's important the stair has a presence on both sides. So the stair goes up through the arch and sort of dog legs around on the back. And I think the next slide shows that the stair coming back up on itself and rising up to a gantry, which will be quite a theatrical sort of almost like a stage where you'll be able to see people coming up and down. You'll be able to look out over the city and up towards Kentish Town, and you enter the Highline through the metal bridge, through a panel in the metal bridge, which we would remove. There's a lift. It's very important for us. The experience of the lift is not secondary to the experience of the stairs. So we have this lift, which does not have a lift shaft. It's going to be a kind of, it's called a rack and pinion lift, so it can operate without a shaft, and it will be open to the elements, be caged in, but open to the elements. And so it should be quite an exciting and dramatic experience riding on the lift. So the next slide shows just the sort of the heights and how these things relate to the Highline on the north side. And the following slide shows an image of how it might feel in Camden Gardens. And I think that the key thing I want to say here is that, you know, each access point, you know, it's very important that the sort of whole experience of arrival, ascent, threshold, passage, and orientation is amplified, and that the experience of using the stairs and the lift need to be as much a part of the experience as the viaduct itself. So the idea is that we're trying to slow people down and contrast the landscape of the top side with the activities down below. And I think on this slide and on the next slide, you know, I think that the point here I want to make is that it's very important the stairs are not only inviting and welcoming and safe, but they're also recognizable wayfinding beacons as well as gateways. So having some, you know, visibility from a distance and having a consistent language between all the access points, despite their very different configurations and unique locations. So here you can see from Water Lane, you already can see that you can see the stair from a distance and people coming up through the Highline. It will pull people down Water Lane and form that connection with Camden Lock. I think it's Jim's slide now.
So again, back to this diagram, you can see the access point that Tatiana just described in the top right. And I think it's a really dramatic sequence of journeys to get up onto that balcony and walk alongside the wall of the viaduct, the outside wall of the viaduct, to then come onto and into the space of the Highline. This is a view that shows in red line all of the various pathways and places that we're sort of overlaying onto the landscape here. And that produces this illustrative plan. You can see on the left, Camden Gardens, the entry balcony onto and into the space of the Highline. The first thing we want to present you with is what we call a train spotting screen. This is a screen that separates you, of course, from the train line, but we've cut windows in it so that you can actually see the trains going by. They're quite frequent and they're very interesting, the way they sort of trundle along. Next is sort of an artifact screen that I'll show you an image of. There's an overlook at Prowse Point and into a woodland seating grove. And as you move further east, we have a seating grandstand, an event space at the top of the access stairs there at Royal College Street, and a couple of overlooks into the space of Royal College Street, and finally onto the catwalk across the bridge. So this illustrative diagram focusing in now on Camden Gardens, and you can see there again the balcony that brings you on to meet that screen, that separation screen, and then to enter the vegetation and continue the journey. This is the beginning. Tatiana just showed you, stepping onto the stairs in the south, coming along the balcony, along the north, and then on the Highline, you will meet what we call this separation screen. This is a requirement for health and safety to keep people safely separate from the trains. But we've created this screen that has a degree of transparency, so you can see through. Most of it will be covered with vegetation, with vines and climbing hydrangea and climbing clematis and this sort of thing. Others, we can actually attach things to that screen, like habitat structures or other art features. There's one area where we'd like to actually install a variety of railway artifacts. And this is one where we're cutting holes in for actually train spotting and actually watching the trains go by. And this is a rendering at the top of the balcony where you enter, you see the screen. In this particular case, it picks up the color theme that we're working with. You have a variety of windows and you can see the trains going by at different height of a window for different age groups. As you move along, you come to what we call the artifact wall. You'll see planting on the right. And the idea of the artifact wall is to collate and collect a variety of artifacts that are characteristic of the Camden Highline. As you move east, you come into a central area that is particularly woodsy and planted with young trees and shrubs and various layers. The idea is to have a variety of seating areas inside the trees and the planting. A lot of the planting is treated, you can see here, with a low shrub layer so that you have very clear sight lines through the planting. You can see the chimney pots and you can see the context underneath the canopy of the trees. But it creates a very beautiful glade within which people can sit and meet friends and spend a bit of time. And we'll have beautiful textural qualities like sitting in a garden while these trains pass by. A lot of the planting, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but there's a lot of sophistication in terms of the ecological makeup of the planting, from woodland to hedgerows to meadows to planted gardens, that ensure a massive amount of biodiversity, not only in terms of planting, but also in terms of habitat for birds and for butterflies and for insects and for all the other milieu of wildlife that make up the ecology of the city. A really rich palette that isn't only biodiverse in terms of its function, but also beautiful in terms of its display, the kinds of colors and textures and range of experiences that they provide throughout different weeks of the year. And again, building habitat for a diverse range of birds, even bats, which are very significant in terms of urban habitats, bee and insect hotels, and really emphasizing this towards the Royal College balcony end of this section. Finally, as we get closer to Royal College Street and Camden Road, you can see the bridge crossing over the intersection there. We continue a catwalk across that intersection. You can also see the building face in the middle, which is an access point, which Tatiana will describe in a minute. But also you'll notice a big balcony there where from the Highline you can step out and look into the space of the street below. There's also a balcony cut into the bridge that looks into the space in between the two bridges here. And this is an early rendering of what that catwalk might look like going across the bridge, leaving one half of it open, sort of as it is, as a found object. And the other side is a really richly planted meadow that pours over the side, over the outside of the bridge in this location. At Royal College Street, we're looking at a major new access point. Tatiana?
So I think when we presented this at the last town hall, we were talking about access through Camden Station, and we since have spoken to Camden's Design Review Panel, and they very strongly recommended this other option, which is not in our ownership or Network Rail's ownership, but we have been looking at this option to take the entrance through the original entrance to the old platform 4, which a lot of the Highline runs along. This is just, it has this historic context. It had this upper story, which at some point was demolished, and the old window was infilled with this this brickwork here. The next slide shows the kind of existing, there's 2 arches inside there hidden away, and the remnants of the old stairwell. Without the stair no longer exists there. So and the next slide just shows again, I think we can just flip through the existing, and you can see what we're proposing to reinstate the stair as it was, to kind of have internal glazing for those 2 arches and the lift tucked in between the arches and the stairwell. So it will pull people through off the street and really open up those 2 arches to become, much more used retail spaces or food and beverage spaces. And if we then come up onto the next level, you can see how those things interact with the Highline. We would remove that infill panel there. You can see we've removed the infill panel where the old window was to allow for a balcony at the top. And you can see in the old stairwell, those it's a little arched windows which let light down into that inner arch below. So we'll let daylight down into the space. And if we just go through these axos as we start cutting away the building, just conceptually to look inside, you can see the old rose window over the stairs, which is similar to the one at platform 1 currently, and the inner spaces of the arches which would be occupied. So we can cut away again, and you can see going past that there's another arch further in next to the lift, and if we remove the stair to look further inside, you can just see the lift there. So this is an image of what it might look like. We've tried to take some of the language of the stair that we've developed at Camden Gardens, so that there's a distinctive palette of materials. It's the same kit of parts, the same balustrades, the same color used, so that it's recognizable as a Highline entrance and from a distance. And I think it would, really draw people through. And the balcony is important in sort of showing, that there's something going on up the top. There's another image here of the inside, what potentially it could look like with the lift past the stair hall and some potential cafe or something on the inside, and reinstating that rose window and then looking up through this building, which, you know, we're really proposing not to do very much to it, just a kind of quite light touch repair, and sort of having a sense of discovering this hidden and sort of lost space in the city, and this extraordinary landscape up above, which you just get a glimpse of from the street. So I think over to Jim again to sort of explain what happens after this.
Yeah, I want to pick up on what you just said, actually. I think a lot of what we're trying to do at both these access locations, as well as on the top side of the Highline viaduct, is exactly to recover these lost and overlooked and hidden places, and to actually clean them up and amplify people's experience and sense of discovery. And we're doing that both architecturally and landscape architecturally in terms of working with these hidden, overlooked places. I just want to touch quickly on lighting. We have been working with our lighting team at Spears Major, very good friends and colleagues. We've worked on a number of projects with them. And you know, our approach towards lighting here is to keep it minimal, to have adequate lighting for safety and security, but to really keep it soft and ambient, to never actually see the source of the light, but to see what the light is actually lighting. In this case, lighting the pathway and the plantings, or in this case, beginning to bring new light quality and you know, revitalize the character of the arches at street level, and to work with this juxtaposition of the steel structure against the brickwork. Again, you never really see the source of the light, but what the light is doing is beginning to light surfaces and bring them back to life. It will make the place feel safe and secure, but at the same time, not be overbearing in terms of its light intensity. You can see here the Royal College Street entrance that Tatiana just described, you know, as something that is lit, again, as a beacon in the evening hours. So finally, and just very quickly, we did want to focus on section 1, but for those of you that were not here for the previous town hall, we just want to touch on other parts of the master plan as you move further east through what we call the Woodland catwalk, through the rail yard gardens, through the wilds to York Way. The Woodland catwalk is envisioned as a much more, even more naturalistic, planted series of gardens than we've described so far, and also to take you across 2 of the bridges there, the St. Pancras Way and Randolph Street Bridge, in a really sort of dramatic cut and paste way, where the bridge itself is left as a kind of remnant or a found object that you would walk over and walk across. There's a proposal for a new stair, potentially at St. Pancras Way. This is underneath the St. Pancras Bridge, winding from the sidewalk up through the structure and up onto the top. And ideas for being able to have hanging gardens in this location too, where hanging plantings can actually come through down to the street level below. Up on top, we have a series of gardens. These will include gardens where neighbors can have gardens where they can grow food and establish habitat. We have a play feature that is very children and family oriented. On the one hand is a sort of a green arbor that people can run through to get from one side to the next. And on the other side, a climbing structure with the separation screen with artwork on the separation screen. There's a proposed access point at Camley Street as part of the new Camley Street development. This will inevitably evolve as Camley Street evolves. And once you come on top in that location, we really have an emphasis on nature, on wildness, much more wild sort of experience in terms of the planting themes, but also lots of birdhouses. These could be done by different artists in the community, as well as habitat exhibits. These are educational exhibits where school children can come up onto the Highline and learn about nature in the city. We're looking at establishing bat habitat. As I mentioned before, bats are actually an important part of urban habitat and urban ecology. And finally, at York Way, a stair and elevator condition here, set within a courtyard garden. And really, again, Tatiana is opening this space up and projecting out a balcony into the space of the street. A really romantic moment, but again, it demonstrates what we're trying to do with this entire project, which is to respect found conditions and leverage and make them more poetic and more palpable and amplify the experience of them, bringing a more abundant sense of nature, but also a really strong sense of social amenity and social opportunity. So just to summarize, this is the master plan. This is an ambitious project. We are optimistic that we can get to completing design and planning approvals for phase 1 in the early part of next year and begin to build that and have that open by 2023 or 4, and moving further east through phase 2 and 3. The ultimate aim is to produce a green thread, over a 1 kilometer long journey, which takes you through a variety of experiences, and that those experiences speak to nature, they speak to community, they speak to art, they speak to culture, and they speak to Camden Town as a really extraordinary place and a sort of a must-see destination in the context of London. With that, I will stop and open the floor for questions and discussion. So back to you, Simon.
Thank you very much, James, and thank you, Tatiana. As ever, it really feels like you brought it to life for us, which is so exciting. And I have to say, we did a huge international design competition to find our team that would help us deliver the design and planning, and we haven't been disappointed for one moment working with Jim and Tatiana and the teams. It really has been a pleasure. So we've got a lot of questions in the chat, so I'm going to try and go through these. I would draw people's attention to the Q&A, the link for which has just been put in the chat by one of my colleagues. So there's some frequently asked questions that are in there. If we don't get to your question here today, and please do sign up to the newsletter. You can do that via the website, but we'll also put a link in the chat because that's the best way of staying up to date with stuff. And someone was asking about this presentation. The key bits of this presentation are either on the website at the moment, or what you're seeing now is a work in progress. So we're not kind of disseminating it too far and wide, lest people start saying that's what's going to happen, because there's still various approval bits that need to be got through. So with those caveats, let me just try and pick up some of these questions in the chat here and see what we can answer. Mick, hi Mick, you've made a point about shared space. I assume that's in reference to shared space on the road around Kentish Town Road. That actually isn't ours, that's Camden's. We just have aspirations to how these things could work, but I absolutely hear you about shared space around pedestrians and cars and how that can be really difficult for everyone. You also make a point, which I'm going to ask Tatiana to pick up on, the lifts being big enough for wheelchairs to turn around within. I'm not entirely sure what the regulations are on that, but Tatiana, can you pick that one up?
Yes. So the lifts at the lift at Camden Gardens is, I think we've based the sizes on the lifts at the tube stations. There's definitely room to to look at the sizing of that. At the moment, I think we've made them sort of 3 meters by 3 meters, the sort of hole with the cage and the lift inside it. At Camden Road Station, if we use the entrance we're showing there, we are quite constricted. So it might be that in that case, that it may have to be a wheelchair that wheels on and has to back out. So we're aware that that's potentially an issue. But we're quite restricted there, and we don't have much flexibility because it's so narrow between the arch and the stairwell.
Thank you, Tatiana. I hope that answers your question, Mick. I mean, this whole site is very constrained, I think is the technical term, i.e. we can't move anything, basically. We have to work with what we've got. But I note your other comment there, Mick, about the access points be fully accessible and must include lift access, and that's certainly our plan all the way through, as I hope you can see. Someone also asked the point about whether or not what happens if lifts break down. There's a limit to what we can do about that. There will be 4 access points and 4 lifts, and hopefully if one's not working, the others will, unless there's a Camden wide power cut. And obviously lifts are better these days than they used to be, and more reliable. And so we certainly hope that they will be up all the time. And obviously we'll try and get them repaired as soon as we can if they do fall down, but there's limits.
Just on that point,
sorry, Tanya, go on.
We are looking at a particularly reliable lift with that particular issue in mind, and that's part of the reason that we chose the one that we have.
Good stuff. And poor Ian Flynn's asked a question about leaves on the line. Oh, Ian, you've been too many winters in Britain. Yes, absolutely. I mean, the stipulations for Network Rail about this are very, very thorough. I mean, we're not even going to be able to put anything that drops a leaf too near the lines for that reason. I don't know if that's anything you want to comment on, Jim.
No, you've said it perfectly well. There's a lot of rules and regulations imposed on us by Network Rail as well as other agencies. So you'll notice that a lot of the trees are mostly on the northern side of the walk. They're kept well away from the tracks, and so I don't expect it to be an issue.
And it's also, of course, true that there is a lot of wild growth up there at the moment that I think if it was causing a problem, Network Rail would already have cut it back. So hopefully we're all right there. By the way, I should also just add to the point Jim was making earlier on, we've done a biodiversity survey and there are no bats up there, which for those of us who are very keen on bats is slightly a shame, but it also means that we don't fall foul of any of the issues that bats can cause. And what we're planning to do up there will massively increase the biodiversity. It's actually not as diverse as I expected it to be. In fact, it's quite sort of narrow in terms of its diversity. So we hope to make quite a big impact on that, which would be really nice. Thank you, by the way, Nick Curran, for the offer of help with the construction management plan and logistics and all that. I know where you live, Nick. I might take you up on that. Thank you. And Matt makes the point about retaining the graffiti. I mean, there's a practical element here. We are in Camden and we're not going to stop the graffiti, frankly. So we're going to have to work with it. I mean, some of the places we were involved in the painting of the bridges that are blue now that say Camden Town and Camden Road. And we thought, no one's ever going to get up there. And you'll know that they've been tagged already. So I think it's about very much working with, in so many ways, in what we've been trying to do here and what Jim and the team have designed. There's a question here, Jim, I'm going to put to you about soil poisoning, contamination. I know you've had to think quite a lot about that and there have been surveys on it. Do you want to touch that one? That's a question from Mike Martin.
Yeah, we addressed this in some detail in the second town hall. And it's really interesting, but we cut it from this one in order to shorten the length of the presentation. But in the second town hall, we talked at length about some of the challenges with working on this viaduct. And one of the bigger ones is the fact that the soil is either very thin and poor, and in some locations it's even contaminated. So we have 3 strategies that will be used in different locations. One is to put an impermeable barrier on the existing ground and import new soil. A second is to do that in a much more localized way, where we're only using soil where we have plantings. And a third, and a really interesting one, is to use what's called habitat bags, which are felt bags. They're quite large, they're about a yard by a yard square. And you can fill them with different types of soil. So some soils could be more alkaline, some could be more acid, some could be more wet, some could be more dry. And what that allows you to do is to not only get the soil up there really easily and put it in place, but it allows for maximum biodiversity, because all of a sudden you can plant so much more in terms of perennials and grasses and things that will grow. So the soil is a big issue, but I think we have a really intelligent set of strategies for working with it.
Thank you, Jim. Next question from Ian is about whether we'll be able to access the station platform directly without going to street level and back up again. That's certainly our aspiration. At the moment, it's a bit kind of either or. We're either going to be able to go through the station, or we're going to be able to go through this new access point on Royal College Street that we've talked about. As Tanya made clear early in her presentation, we don't currently own either of those. I mean, we don't own any of it. We'll have a lease with Network Rail, but someone else has got a lease on that Royal College Street site at the moment. So, we are progressing this option because the Camden Design Review Panel have specifically asked us to include it in the planning application. But there are some hurdles to get through there. But yes, it would be in our long-term aspiration to be able to move directly from a train onto the Highline one way or another. Thank you, Andy, for your comment about the Royal College Street entrance. Yes, we agree. It does look pretty good. There's a question here I don't fully understand. Hannah, you might need to help me with the acronym LWT. But the question is, how far is work around Camley Street involving LWT? I'm not quite sure who that is. Others on... I don't know if Tanya might know what that stands for. But the Camley Street development is a Camden run development. And we're not getting too much into the detail at the moment because a lot may change by the time we get to that bit. And the land ownership around that is really complicated. So there's an element of we're kind of letting Camden get on with their stuff, and we'll work with things as they evolve. Paul, nice to see you, Paul. How will you cross the roads where there are currently only a 1 metre wide path? Well, you mean the bridges, I think, Paul, where you've just got the little gantry at the moment. Well, we'll cover those to some extent, and I think there was a slide showing that in James's presentation there. It's quite nice when you're up there to be able to look down, but of course we also need the capacity, and you're quite right, you need space up there. But there are places where it's so constrained that there won't be space for segregated cycling. As you get towards York Way, it does get quite constrained, so there'll be places where it will get below that 3 metre width, only just, I think, but too small for segregated cycling. And Valerie's asking about the raised streets and the green loop stuff. I won't go into that too much now, but the green loop, as Jim mentioned, is all about a 4 mile pedestrian route around the 3 town centres, Camden Town, King's Cross and Euston, and trying to kind of find ways of pedestrian routes that don't use main roads, which of course in a post-pandemic world have become more important to us all. To what extent is the scheme post-planning permission funded? Well, that's on me. So we are at the moment trying to raise about 35 million quid to build the entirety of it. We could build the first section for about 12, and we're talking to a range of people, including commercial potential sponsors or corporate donors, high net worth individuals, the public sector, some trusts and foundations. And we're also trying to raise a separate amount of money to create an endowment that will fund the maintenance, because we want it to be amazing and we want it to stay amazing. But that's part of what comes next. And some of that funding isn't available until we've got planning permission. So there's a little bit of chicken and egg, but we're working on it. Who asked that question? That was Ian again. But we've raised £1 million to date, so we're confident that we can raise the rest. But, how quickly it goes up will depend on how quickly we can raise the money. So my question to everyone on the call is, who do you know? You might know people who are trustees of these trusts and foundations, high net worth individuals, high up in some of those corporates that want to think about how they use their brand in future. Please do get in touch, because that's very important to us. Otherwise, one day we're just going to have to call it the Smirnoff Highline. I've warned you before. Help us find the money, because otherwise that's where we're going to end up. I'm joking. Okay. Shane asked a question about the project being conducive towards greater density, for lack of a better term, down the line. I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that, Shane. You might want to. What would be the estimated increase in density post-project? Do you mean footfall? Anyway, let us know which direction you're going in there, so we know. John asked a question: will be the entrance from the park that is next to the estate that is on the other side of the railway lines that are next to Camley Street? Basically, we're not going to be able to have entrances on the southern side of the line because of the trains. We might be able to do clever things here and there, as Tanya's designed in Camden Gardens, where the stairs start to the south, but that's because you can get underneath through the arch. But we're not going to be able to create things, certainly within existing budgets, where you either dig new tunnels or create bridges over the existing train lines. That's a very expensive thing to do. And Shane asked another question about the strategy if the projects such as the Peckham Coal Line are built as well. I mean, Peckham Coal Line has been going for quite some time. Because they're in such different parts of London, different local authorities, I think there's a limit to the synergies, but we're certainly trying to think about synergies with things more local to us. Can we create links up to the walk that's being proposed through the new Murphy's site up to Hampstead, for example? We've talked about the Green Loop, and there's also the new Camden Goods Yard site. They've got some raised green areas. Can we think about how we at least wayfind between that, down the canal, up to our High Line? So we are trying to think about that, but Peckham's a little bit way off at the moment, frankly, both perhaps in terms of deliverability and being deliverable and in location. But we're always up for ideas, Shane, if you've got any. Will the trains slow down? No, the trains won't slow down, because nothing we do must come anywhere near affecting the trains in any way, shape or form. But they don't go very fast. It's not like standing next to intercity trains, and we've all been up there without a separating wall, and it really isn't a problem. In fact, it's quite nice. They trundle rather than speed past, but the wall will also stop people, obviously, running in front of trains. So no, the trains won't slow down. There's an idea here from, I love that name, Historic Mulliking. Engage local artists to produce graffiti to discourage vandalism. Graffiti, I think that's a great idea. Historic, if that's what I can call you that. And there's a question from Lily there about a destination park versus a local park. It'd be interesting, Jim, in your experience here, because obviously the New York High Line has had to sort of match that local visitor destination kind of demand quite a lot. What would you say might happen in Camden as a result of that experience?
Well, I think here in Camden, we're definitely trying to balance this belonging to Camden. It's been grown up from the grassroots in Camden. It needs to belong to the people of Camden and so on. But at the same time, it's such an extraordinary thing and of great interest to many, many people that I do think it should also at the same time be a destination. And visitors to London, as well as residents in further boroughs and further afield in London, this should be on their to-do list to come and visit it. It will certainly be special enough and unique enough and extraordinary enough to be of interest to a great variety of people. So we've been trying to balance the local with the global, if you will. In New York, I mean, the New York High Line, it's funny because it was always imagined and designed as something quiet. We always thought that the Riverside Park, the Hudson River Park, that's only 1 block away along the river, would be where the majority of people would go, and that the High Line itself would be a strolling garden. But alas, it has indeed turned into a major destination. It's very popular with all sorts of people, all sorts of ages. And that's part of its appeal. It's become a really cosmopolitan walk. It's as much about seeing the plants and the gardens and nature and the great views and vistas across the city, as much as it is about people watching and simply being amidst other people. I think the context in Camden here is different. It's a very different vibe. It's a very different intensity. It's a very different population. So while I think there will be visitation from people outside of Camden and around the world even, I do not believe you're going to see the sort of 15 million people that you see annually on the New York Highline. But it is a balancing act. We want it to be authentic and local to the communities of Camden, for them to have a place of expression and a place that they can use daily, but also for it to be sufficiently exciting and stimulating to be a destination.
Great, thank you, Jim. I've worked out what LWT is, the London Wildlife Trust, isn't it, Hannah? So, and you're talking about the Camden Street Nature Reserve. I've done a walkabout with of the Highline with the London Wildlife Trust, and we are in conversation with the Camden Street Nature Reserve. I mean, we don't actually touch. It goes through this new development. The line to connect us goes right through this new development that Camden are working on Camden Street. So our contact has largely been in relation to that development rather than Highline specifically. But we certainly hope that people will see these additional green spaces growing up all over the place as all being part of a kind of green infrastructure that who knows, one day may take over the whole of our pedestrian experience in London. There was clarification here. Where was it? Sorry, someone was clarifying a question I asked. I think it was, John, you were talking about the park on the north side at Maiden Lane. So I think you mean where the basketball court is. That again is not part of the Network Rail land directly. The funny bridge that you walk over, if you ever see the sign there, does say that it's Network Rail land, and they only let you use it because of the kindness of their hearts. The scrub land is actually Camden's, and it would be nice to include that, but it's at the moment we have to deal within the constraints of what is in the heads of terms that Network Rail give us, because it's all their land. And as we get further down that end, as things evolve, it may well be that we might be able to sort of scoop in bits of certainly scrubland, if not proper parks, but bits of unmanaged land could be included. In fact, that's one of the bits of feedback we've had from people down at the Maiden Lane estate, is for antisocial behaviour reasons, could we scoop that sort of more disused bits of land into the Highline? And we could certainly try and do that, but it's not all within our gift. And Daniel, careful what you offer here, Daniel. Daniel's saying, is there opportunities to work on the project in future? Well, of course there is, Daniel. Where do you live? Give us your email address. And we've already got 300 friends of the Highline, people who've signed up to volunteer. Some of them helped us do the planting at Camden Gardens. And we will. It's going to be quite important to the maintenance. It's going to cost us a lot of money, but in terms of maintaining it, having a sort of volunteer army to help us do that, I think is going to be really important. So yes, drop us your email, Daniel, please. And thank you for the offer, Mick. That's really helpful. Yes, indeed, I do have your contact details. Oh, Mick's gone already by the look of him, actually. But nice to see you on the call anyway. And there's one more question here. Oh, did I skip your question about loo facilities? Oh, I didn't see that question, Marlene, about loo facilities. We are not planning to put toilets on the Highline. There are some facilities at ground level. They're quite complicated things to install on viaducts at height. But we think there are public toilets relatively near each of the entrances. I think, what was the question? There was another question here. Paul had another question about, there are many diesel hauled freight trains every day. Is any, when we have so Paul's question is about whether or not there's greenery going to be designed into the wall that might absorb the particles released from those engines. I don't think we're that sophisticated, Paul. I don't know, unless you've got plans I'm not aware of, Jim. I think that we're keen. I mean, we hope that that most of that track is electrified now, I think. But I hear you that there are still some diesel trains operating on there. There's going to be the wall, and bits of that will have green on it, which will help, I think. But how much it'll take it down, I don't know. I don't know if you've got a better answer than me to that, Jim or Tanya.
No. I assume that with time, diesel and this sort of thing will be replaced, and they're pretty infrequent, I think, on the track.
Yeah, I'm sure the long-term aspiration is to electrify it all. Yeah. There's another question here from Lily about connecting the ecology of the canal. Tanya, you're nodding there. Have you got a intelligent answer to that?
Well, I mean, I think there's no direct kind of green thread that links to the canal, but obviously it is very close, particularly at Camden Gardens and in other places. And I suppose there are certain corridors where maybe insects and things could travel along, certainly kind of foxes and whatnot. So, but I don't think in because there isn't a direct physical connection, there's a limit to how much you can create those corridors.
And I think, as Jim was saying earlier on, you never quite know how these things are going to pan out, because people don't always use things in the way you expect them to. But the more interconnectivity we can have, the better. Here's a materials one for you, Jim, from Akin. Are there any preferred materials for decking, timber, wood, plastic, composite, etc.? Obviously, there's a lot of constraints in terms of what we can use from Network Rail, but do you want to talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, we're actually working with a variety of fiberglass and plastic materials that are very economical because of their sustainability and their returnability to the cyclical economy. We looked at wood, but it has a durability issue as well as slip issues. We looked at metal, but we're not allowed to use metal because of the electrification issues on the Highline. We looked at things like gravel, but they don't lend themselves to wheelchair accessibility. We looked at pavers, but there's a need to continually access utilities that are subgrade. So we need some sort of removable panelized modular system. And so we can't use wood, we can't use metal. So we're looking at this fiberglass. It's actually an extraordinarily sophisticated material. It's easy to use. It's affordable. We can give it any color that we want. We can texturize it. We can make it in any way that we want. So, and it also echoes the catwalk-like character of a railway landscape. It's sort of in keeping with that industrial transportational viaduct-esque sort of character. So we're quite excited about using it. I think it'll be quite novel and new and be a different experience.
Thank you, Jim. Paul has made the point about all freight trains being pulled by diesel, and I'm sure you know better than me, Paul, the truth of that. I suppose my only other thought on that would just be that when you're on the platform at Camden Road Station and the freight train comes through, you'll be exposed, and I would hope that when you're walking on the Highline with all the greenery around, the exposure will certainly be no worse. And hopefully a little better. Dominic has asked a very interesting question about whether dogs will be allowed on the Highline, to which I say I kind of ask the question back to the room, really. I know whenever we ask the question about bikes, there's normally quite a strong anti-bike reaction because lots of people feel that the canal has slightly been tainted by the amount of cycling that goes on there. But how do people feel about dogs on the High Line? Not that we're going to be able to have a dog police force up there anyway. But let us know what you think. Shane's made the point about developing walking tours around all the different High Lines and stuff like that. I think that'd be a lovely idea, Shane. So you could get partner with a football club for free tickets as a reward. Well, there you go. That would be nice. Suggestions in the chat. Valerie's also made the point about, I think it's a general concern about what sort of footfall will it generate, and what will the markets generate post-pandemic. It's difficult to tell, although they seem to be holding up. We're just going to have to manage some of those problems, I think, as they occur. If it becomes hugely popular and we have to start closing it, well, so be it. It will be closable, just like any park. It will be closed at dusk and opened at dawn, so it'll have to be emptied at night. So there will be facilities to close it if we absolutely have to. There's a positive dog vote there from Valerie, and from Ali. Yes to dogs, no to bikes. But that's so the poll's going well anyway. And thank you for your thoughts about Royal College Street, Barry. That's really nice. Cyclists respect the pedestrians, unlike the canal path. Yes. Oh, let's see. And there's a no to dogs there from someone as well. But I think that's a hot topic that will probably rage. My feeling is I've got to raise the money first. We'll worry about the dogs in a bit. I just pausing there to see if my colleagues have spotted things that I haven't answered. Yes, there's an interesting point someone makes about the because of the narrowness, there may be some issue with dogs, people not liking to be too close to some bigger dogs, because there are these sort of constrained areas that we do have to think carefully about. But that will come further down the line. And John makes the point about dogs on leads. There you go. There's a conditional yes. You can see it's always an interesting debate, this one. Look, the comments are coming thick and fast now. Well, we'll try and scoot them up and see if we can make sense of them. No pun intended. There. Someone did ask if we could talk a little bit more about the Green Loop, and we've got a little bit more of time left, and I think I've covered all the questions we've been asked. I could quickly throw up the Green Loop graphic and talk a bit more about that if people are interested. Or we could let everyone go earlier. But I will just pause there again as well to see if Jim or Tanya have got points that they'd like to throw in before we get to the end.
I think the only thing I would add by way of closing is, everybody loves the New York Highline, but it was an extraordinary collusion of events and people that allowed it to happen and made it happen. And I don't think it would happen today. I think it would probably be demolished, and it would now all be expensive condominium buildings. We just happen to have the right grassroots leadership in terms of personality and character, not unlike Simon and his team. We had the right mayor who wanted to invest in the project. We had the right planning agency and director of planning that saw this as a priority project. We had a number of people who really wanted to donate and to finance the thing. So when you add up all of the factors that went into making that project happen, it was just an extraordinary moment in time where all these people and interests intersected. And I'm really not sure it would have happened under different conditions. It's too complicated a project. And I think very much this is true too. And so I would urge you all who are listening and watching to make your voices heard. in the political sphere and say that this is the kind of project you would like to see investment made in, that it offers green space to a part of London that does not really have a lot of green space. It offers a green space that functions as connective tissue. It's really a biodiversity corridor tying together the King's Cross part of the town across to Camden and potentially across to Regent's Park, which is a massive reserve of nature and biodiversity. It offers community amenities that are presently not available. It offers educational experiences, especially for disadvantaged school children and people that don't really have access to learn about nature. There are opportunities for arts and for culture and for so many other things, that this is really a great urban project that the public have said they are behind. But I would urge you all to speak up very positively and in strong support of this, in order to make sure that the momentum continues and that the sort of investment that we need comes through.
Thank you, Jim. Tanya, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I think on that same topic, that the sort of potential fragility of this, but also I think, Simon, you in a way been quite modest about the amount of interest in potential funding for it. So there is a momentum, and it's just important to kind of keep that rolling. I think on this issue of the sort of local and the green loop, I mean, I live and work within a few hundred meters of the Highline, and I can completely see that as a local weekly kind of walk with the family, it completely connects into all of these other kind of, the canal, the Regent's Park along the canal, Coldrops Yard, and it forms this very clear loop where you could do this kind of Sunday walk and function, maybe in a similar way to the New York Highline as a place where you go and you bump into friends, and it really becomes a central spine in the community, and that it goes through not just the sort of private residences in Camden, but the majority of it will go through, past the Agar Grove estate and Maiden Lane estate, and through parts of London that really don't have access to green space immediately. So I think it's a really important project for kind of bringing Camden together along that spine.
Very good, thank you. And maybe that's a good moment to end. Lily's made an interesting comment there about, we've spoken a lot about the constraints in terms of the width, but we haven't spoken much about the opportunity. And in fact, it gets up to 20 metres deep round the back of that Camden Road Overground station. You don't realise when you're on that eastbound platform that there used to be 2 more platforms behind you. There really is a lot of space there. And at Camley Street as well, there's an awful lot of space up and around the stuff there that we can make some really good use of. I think we're going to draw to a close here. You can look at the Green Loop stuff on our website. You can look at most stuff on our website. Please go there. I'm going to leave you all with 3 thoughts. The first, who do you know? Help us with that. Tanya's right. We're doing well, but we can always do better, and we'll need to do better in order to get this thing up and running. Please sign up. Number 2, please sign up to the newsletter, because it's really important that we know who's out there, who's interested, and that you stay up to date, because there are going to be some crucial moments. And this is the third ask. When this is submitted for planning, it's very easy for the only people to respond are those who've got some sort of an issue with it. Everyone that's ever been involved in any kind of planning application knows that. You don't get positive responses on the whole. You just get a few negative ones. Let's make this one of the most positive responded to planning applications there's ever been, because I think that will help us in loads and loads of ways. Yes, it'll help us get through planning. It'll help us with the political buy-in, but it'll also help us hugely with the funding. So please don't think, oh, someone else will do it. We'll let you know when the moment comes. It's not yet. It'll be sometime next year. Early next year, hopefully. But please do make the effort to respond to the planning application, say you love it, and that'll really help make sure that it becomes a reality. I'm going to leave us there. I don't think we've got any other comments there to talk about, although I think the dog debate is going to rage on and on and on, and long may it so. Thank you all very much for your time this evening. Please do sign up to the newsletter. Thank you very much to Jim and Tanya for giving up your yet another evening to one of these, and we look forward to seeing you all up there and on the other side. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Tatiana, while I have you, can you just text me your phone number so I can give you a quick call?
Yeah.
And I'll give you a quick call now. Is that good?
Yeah, that's fine.
Good. Okay, Simon,